There are many myths about the Middle Ages, such as medieval people used to die at a very young age, and medieval people were very dirty. However, most of these claims are just myths and misconceptions, which today's people still believe are true. From the idea of the Dark Ages to the myth that everyone was short, in this video, we will debunk 10 myths about the Middle Ages that everyone still believes are true. Number 1. People were short and died young. Many people assume that people were much shorter in the Middle Ages, based on evidence such as the small size of many medieval doorframes. In reality, archaeological investigation reveals that typical heights have barely changed over the last 1,000 years. From the 10th to the 19th centuries, the average height remained relatively constant at 158 centimeters for women and 170 centimeters for males. It is likewise incorrect to believe that life duration has been substantially decreased. Averages are distorted by extremely high mortality rates during epidemic illness outbreaks, such as the Black Death of 1348, as well as the high rate of childhood mortality. In reality, sources provide numerous cases of village seniors in their 80s who can recall significant social changes since their childhood. Number 2. Peasants were revolting and irrational. It is true that medieval peasants had limited access to education and literacy, but they were far from ignorant. When they participated in gatherings, they did it strategically, intentionally mentioning crucial documents about their ancient privileges, such as the Domesday Book of 1086. In terms of general knowledge, many peasants were able to effectively use strategic and quite complex rationales for managing their agricultural issues. And surviving legal evidence from across Europe shows that peasants knew how to use legal institutions and courts to their benefit, whether in disputes with neighbors, husbands and wives, or even their masters. Number 3. Medieval towns were dirty. While many medieval towns definitely did stink, people were obviously concerned about it. More and more recent scholarly work has centered on efforts to keep medieval towns clean and healthy, particularly in the late medieval period. While we frequently see or read images of urban filth and decline, there was a great deal of regulation over things like dumping sewage in the streets or allowing animals to roam freely. Number 4. Medieval people were mindlessly violent. Although it is difficult to measure quantitatively, levels of interpersonal physical violence were most likely very high. However, this was something that medieval people were really concerned about. Across a variety of contexts, they agonized about levels of violence and the harm that it could cause, while simultaneously acknowledging that it could be a valuable way of restoring order on occasion. Domestic violence, for example, was occasionally promoted as a way to punish disobedient women, but it was also a source of fear that it could escalate. Chivalry codes attempted to channel and contain violence while also glorifying it. Number 5. Medieval people believed the world was flat and had little understanding of the larger world. While medieval people enjoyed imaginative stories about terrible peoples in faraway regions, the majority were remarkably well informed about the world beyond their own. This was due in part to the fact that travel was so popular during the Middle Ages. Pilgrimages, trade and business, and diplomacy all required a lot of movement. And did medieval people all believe the world was flat? Actually, most people understood that the world was round. Medieval maps may appear naive to modern eyes due to their purpose, which was generally devotional rather than a scaled geographic representation. Number 6. Medieval people had no sense of humor. This is possibly the most apparent myth of all. While it may not always be to our liking, medieval life was full with wit and humor. There was a demand for jokes ranging from delicate and intellectual to filthy and bawdy. Sometimes the remaining evidence is material. For example, a jester from northern France known as Fromage sealed his invoice with a slice of cheese, the mold of which still clings unpleasantly on the parchment. Another merchant from the Netherlands used a funny quip to explain why he needed to start a new sheet of parchment in his records, since his cat had urinated on the page. Funny stories were also common, as people enjoyed being entertained. Stories by authors such as Italian poet Giovanni Boccaccio and English writer Geoffrey Chaucer sometimes drew on older folk stories and revelled in harsh humour and situations of mistaken identification. Number 7. Religious dogma meant that no one thought for themselves. The medieval church did not encourage tolerance, but it also did not attempt, or have the resources, to impose strict religious uniformity. While the Middle Ages were marked by oppression and persecution, many medieval universities actively supported theological thinking of a highly sophisticated nature. Paradigm-shifting discoveries in knowledge were accomplished by asking fundamental questions, such as the nature of God. On a more popular level, people had a variety of religious beliefs. The barrier between magic and religion was blurred, and a variety of religious activities emerged that may appear weird to us now. Amulets and charms were a popular and widely accepted technique to cope with illness or pregnancy. Number 8. Torture was used often, and cruel corporal punishment was ubiquitous. In many situations, corporal punishment was replaced with a monetary payment. Often, authorities were hesitant to punish people physically. When executions did occur, they frequently inspired sympathy and terror. In fact, that was the objective. Torture was utilized in some circumstances, but medieval intellectuals were concerned about the issues it created, including the possibility of eliciting desperate and false confessions. Number 9. There was no concept of childhood. This myth arose from a famous book by historian Philippe Ariès, first published in 1960, which stated that there was no unique concept of children in the Middle Ages. It is plainly false. Medieval children were undoubtedly handled differently than modern children, but there was a genuine awareness that children had different needs and behaviours than adults. Nicholas Orme's study on medieval schooling has provided the most detailed illustration of this. The survival of medieval toys is a comforting reminder that children were often regarded to be pretty exceptional. They rode hobby horses, played marbles, and cuddled dolls. Number 10. There was little trade or commerce. This is precisely when modern business practices first emerged. Extremely sophisticated business patterns arose, both locally and internationally. These were typically supported by complicated credit systems, and the 14th century witnessed the formation of what are now known as supercorporations. And it is false that all lending at interest was done by Jewish communities, even if this became an increasingly harmful anti-Semitic stereotype. So here were 10 myths about the Middle Ages that everyone still believed today were today. I hope you liked this video. Do subscribe to my channel, Medieval Mind, for more videos about Middle Ages like this.